Number 15. Hinterkaifeck. This small farmstead about 43 miles north of Munich was devastated by an event that occurred on March 31st, 1922. This unsolved case involves 6 people, an entire family, including 2 grandparents and their 35-year-old daughter, along with the daughter's 2 children and the family's maid, all having their lives taken with a pickaxe-like tool. Several days before this event occurred, Andreas, the grandfather of the farm, told his neighbors that he'd seen one-way footprints in the snow heading towards his farm from the forest. He also said that he'd found a newspaper he wasn't familiar with and had heard someone in the attic. The house keys had gone missing as well. Whatever occurred that day on the farm must have been a nightmare, one event that you won't be able to unsee if you should Google the event. Investigators believe that each member of the family was somehow lured into the barn in turn, after which they had their lives taken with a mattock. The 2-year-old boy and the maid were both found in the house. The maid had just arrived on the farm the day of the attack, as the previous maid had quit because she thought the farm was haunted. The perpetrators are believed to have stayed in the home for several days after the events, as smoke was seen from the chimney by neighbors. It wasn't until the next week that the family was found, and after investigating, which brought forth over 100 suspects, the case has since gone cold. Don't Google it, or you'll feel even colder. Number 14. Cabin 28, another unsolved case that will keep you up at night. This one occurred in Keddie, California in 1981. 4 lives were taken in cabin 28 of the Keddie resort: a mother, her son, her daughter, and a friend. The daughter was not found at the scene, but was recovered 3 years later in Camp 18 in 1984. One of the other daughters discovered the scene after returning to the cabin from a sleepover. The events were particularly vicious, and although more than 4,000 man-hours were spent trying to solve the case, it went cold. 2 suspects have since been considered, both of whom have since passed away. If you want to go to sleep tonight, don't look into this case, because it will have you jumping at every sound. Number 13. Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo. You've heard of Jack the Ripper, but have you heard of the Rostov Ripper? If you haven't, don't Google him. The Rostov Ripper, also known as the Butcher of Rostov or the Red Ripper, was an active Soviet serial killer from 1978 to 1990. Yep, that's a 12-year spree for which the evil individual, Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo, eventually confessed to taking the lives of 52 people during this period, also confessing to doing bizarre things with the bodies like chewing off noses. Please do not Google the rest. The man's predisposition to eating people may stem back to his youth. When he was a child, his mother told him that his brother had been kidnapped when he was 4 years old and had been eaten by neighbors who were starving. While this account has never been confirmed, these stories were not unusual for Soviet times. When Chikatilo was caught on a spree for the second time in 1990, he said during his confession that his victims were everywhere. "I do not need to look for them," he told investigators. "Every step I took, they were there." Cue infinite chills. Number 12. The case of the lead masks. You should never Google the lead masks case unless you're looking for a real head scratcher. This case is unsolved and involves various events that resulted in the passings of Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana, 2 Brazilian electronic technicians. Their bodies were recovered on August 20th, 1966. After a young man flying a kite discovered them on Vintam Hill in Rio de Janeiro. Each of the men were wearing a lead eye mask, a waterproof coat, and a formal suit, and neither body showed signs of a struggle. An empty water bottle laid beside them, along with a bag of 2 wet towels and a notebook with cryptic messages written on it. One message read, 16:30 be at the specified location, 18:30 ingest capsules, After the effect protect metals, await signal mask. In their final hours, witnesses noted that Miguel had appeared very nervous and was checking his watch regularly. When they were found, the autopsy showed that their internal organs were too decomposed for testing. Theories about what actually happened to the pair run the gamut from UFOs to foul play to some sort of cult group of scientific spiritualists. If you want to be Googling for hours on end, go ahead and delve into this case, but don't say I didn't warn you. Number 11. Faryan Wardrip. Knowing that someone might take a life for no apparent reason makes you want to become a permanent shut-in. Faryan Edward Wardrip is one of those serial killers who you wish you hadn't Googled. He was active in Texas in the mid-80s, where he began a spree that spanned 2 years. He took the lives of 5 women, all younger than 25 years old and small in size and stature. After taking his final life in 1986, Wardrip called and confessed to taking the life of Tina Kimbrough within 72 hours of doing it. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison. After serving less than a third of that sentence, was released on parole in 1997 with the restriction of an ankle monitor. However, in 1999, 2 more lives were linked to Wardrip with new DNA evidence. Wardrip also confessed to a 3rd and 4th, and for all this, he was sentenced to lethal injection. Unless you want to be in a permanent state of paranoia, it's best to avoid reading more into this individual. Number 9. Dorothy Jane Scott. We all laugh when we say we're Facebook stalking someone, but stalking is not a laughing matter. It can turn horrifying, as it did in the case of Dorothy Jane Scott in 1980. Scott had taken her 2 colleagues to the hospital after one suffered a spider bite. They were waiting for a prescription, and Scott ran outside to bring the car around. But as her car approached the entrance, it suddenly sped up and drove away. Her colleagues couldn't see inside the car due to the blinding headlights. They reported their friend missing a couple hours later, and it was later discovered that a man had been stalking her for months, even going so far as to make anonymous phone calls to her and threatening to cut her up into bits so no one will ever find her. When Scott was still missing in June of that year, a local newspaper published a story about her disappearance, and a man called in, claiming to have taken her life. Scott's mother also received phone calls over the span of 4 years from a man claiming the same. Finally, in 1984, some of Scott's remains were uncovered, but the case was never solved and should not be Googled. It remains one of the strangest unsolved events. Number 8. The BTK Strangler. Many have heard of the American serial killer known as the BTK Strangler, but when you unmask this person via Google, you'll become his next victim because his brutal slayings will haunt your dreams. Dennis Lynn Rader is the BTK unmasked. He came upon the Kansas scene in 1974, and over nearly 2 decades, took 10 lives, the last of which occurred in 1991. Apart from his sadistic treatment of his victims, he took his dedication to insanity a step further by dressing up in their clothes as to taunt them or reenact their passings by his hands. Images of the scenes and his victims are something you should never Google. Doing so will make your stomach turn. How did he get away with it for so long? From 1974 to 1988, he worked as a security alarm installer with the ADT Security Services, installing systems in homes where unknowing homeowners wanted to secure themselves from the very man who was installing it, the BTK Strangler. His sadism went a step further when he began to taunt police, the media, and the general public by sending letters detailing his actions to area news and the police. He was free for more than a decade after taking his last life, after which it seems he could no longer fight the urge to taunt the police some more, so he started sending letters again in 2004, which led to his capture in 2005. He is now serving 10 consecutive life sentences. Number 7. Meredith Kercher. This is one of those cases where trial by media led many to convict those accused of taking the life of Kercher even before the trial began. you're likely more familiar with the accused, Amanda Knox, than you are with the victim. Knox was Kercher's American roommate, and she and her Italian boyfriend, Rafael Solito, were at once tried for taking her life. If you have a queasy stomach, do not Google the related photos of this event. According to Knox's account, she discovered the front door open and drops of red liquid in the bathroom on the morning of November 2nd, 2007. Kercher's door was locked, and Knox didn't think anything of it, but when she returned later that day with her boyfriend, Kercher still didn't answer her door, and the pair noticed a broken window. That's when they called the police. After Kercher's body was found, a crazy media circus began to acrobat around the event. The pair were charged, and only after that were fingerprints found at the crime scene belonging to a totally different person, who was eventually found guilty. While the pair's conviction was eventually annulled in 2015, to this day, the Supreme Court of Cassatan stated it was a proven fact that Knox was at the scene while Kercher's life was being taken. Unless you have time to sift through a bunch of terrible police work and media misinformation in the search for truth, I'd skip this one. Number 6. The Sodder Family Fire. What happened to the Sodder family on Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1945? That's the question many have asked. Since the fire destroyed their home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, the Sodder family, led by George and Jenny, had 10 children, 9 of whom were living at home at the time of the fire. 4 of the children, along with George and Jenny, escaped the fire. Well, the remaining 5 were never recovered. For some reason, the family believed the others had survived and were only missing. They began putting up billboards of the remaining children on State Route 16 during the 1950s. The billboard remained until the late 1980s. George Sodder insisted that the fire was arson, and not, as the fire department had stated, an electrical fire. George began to theorize that the Sicilian Mafia had taken his 5 children as punishment for George's opposition to Mussolini in his native Italy. Investigations on the state and federal level brought forth nothing. However, in the 60s, the Sodder family received what they believed was a photo of one of their sons as an adult. What really happened? A Google search will lead to many conspiracy theories. Don't Google it unless you want to be flooded with conspiracy theories. Number 5. Frederic Bourdin. Have you ever wanted to become another person? Frederic Bourdin, a serial imposter known as the Chameleon, will show you how it's done. Bourdin has assumed more than 500 false identities since he was a child. At least 3 of these identities were those of missing persons, including Nicholas Barclay, and if not for one investigator, he could have pulled it off. At 13 years old, Nicholas Barclay disappeared from San Antonio, Texas in June of 1994 after playing basketball with his friends. He was never seen or heard from again, that is, until Bourdin stole his identity 3 years later, and in 1997 flew to the US, despite his French accent and brown eyes, where Nicholas had blue ones. Bourdin was able to convince the Barclays that he was their son, and that his takers had changed his eye color. The Barclays took Bourdin in, and he lived with them for 5 months. However, a private investigator who was working with a TV crew capturing footage of the family became suspicious of Bourdin, whose ears didn't match Nicholas's. The FBI got involved and took the man's DNA and fingerprints, which were, of course, matched with his real identity. He was charged with perjury and passport fraud and was sent to prison for 6 years. Did he learn from his punishment? Of course not. He tried to act again, returning to France and claiming to be Leo Bali, a 14-year-old missing boy. He then tried again in Spain, claiming to be Ruben Sanchez Espinoza, whose mother had passed away in Madrid. No one fell for the act in those cases. However, not long after, he successfully lived for a month as Spanish orphan Francisco Hernandez Fernandez at College Jean Monnet in Pau, France. If you don't want to find yourself in a catch me if you can rabbit hole of false identities, don't Google Frederic Bourdin. Number 4. Johann Jack Unterweger. This Austrian serial killer took lives across several countries and continents and became a minor celebrity doing it. Do not Google this man. Johann was first caught and convicted of taking a life in 1974, but was released in 1990 after being rehabilitated. He was embraced by Austrian society, so much so that the autobiography he'd written was taught in schools, and he even became a journalist. He was sent to LA to write a story for an Austrian magazine, and during his time there, he is believed to have taken the lives of 3 women. He was also later found guilty of taking the lives of 6 women in Austria and 1 in Czechoslovakia within a year of his release in 1990. Rehabilitated? I think not. After he was convicted of these additional acts and sentenced to life in prison without parole, he took his own life for taking the lives of all these women. He truly is a sick human being. Number 3. Bud Dwyer. Pennsylvania Republican State Senator Robert Bud Dwyer served as the 30th Treasurer of Pennsylvania from 1981 until his passing in 1987. It was then that things went horribly wrong. A little backstory. State withholding errors in the late 80s resulted in an overpayment of federal taxes by state workers in Pennsylvania. This led to accounting firms competing for a multi-million-dollar contract to find out how much compensation was owed to these state workers. Well, who was in charge of choosing the accounting firm to win this contract? Robert B. Dwyer was. Computer Technology Associates, the California firm that eventually won the $4.6 million contract, allegedly bribed Dwyer with $300,000 worth of kickbacks, which led to Dwyer being found guilty on 11 counts of conspiracy, perjury, mail fraud, and interstate transportation in aid of racketeering. He was faced with a potential $300,000 fine and up to 55 years in prison, and his sentencing was scheduled for January 23, 1987, but he would not live to see that day. After requesting and failing to receive the assurance of a presidential pardon, Dwyer told his press secretary to arrange a press conference for the day before his sentencing. Reporters expected to hear Dwyer announce his resignation the next morning, but instead the agitated Dwyer appeared before the press to claim his innocence and read a rambling 21-page text about the problems with the criminal justice system. After the 30-minute speech was over, he continued with the final page of his prepared remarks and then said, "Please leave immediately if you have a weak stomach or mind, since I don't want to cause physical or mental distress." Then, after telling his family he loved them, he said, "Goodbye to you all on the count of 3. Please make sure that the sacrifice of my life is not in vain." He passed out some envelopes to be delivered to specific people, including his family, and then took out a blued Smith & Wesson revolver from a manila envelope, and that's when panic ensued. Some fled, others pleaded that Dwyer put down the gun, but after a moment on live television, Dwyer took his own life. If you have any sense or respect, don't Google it. Remember, mental health resources are always available if you need someone to talk to. Number 2. The 4chan serial killer. 4chan is known for allowing users to post anonymously. In many cases, this can lead to bad things, very bad things. For instance, when a serial killer uses 4chan to brag about what he claims is his own work, in August of 2015, one user posted to the B-board, a board known for random postings. He wrote, "I have taken the lives of several women for pleasure. If you can guess a name of any of these women, I will upload their photo." He went on to dictate that no more than 10 guesses per post was allowed, and any names guessed after that would be ignored. He also said that he had disposable camera pics and Polaroids. and some pics before and after, making it into a game of sorts. He claimed that if readers guessed all the names, he'd reveal where he dumped a body in 1999. Then he said that, to get the ball rolling, he'd post one of his victims for free, since readers were unlikely to guess her name. Some 4chaners began calling the guy out, saying he was full of it and the timestamp was wrong, while others started guessing names. The first woman he posted was later identified as Shauna Maynard, who had her life taken in the late 90s in Vegas. Soon a name that was guessed was a match, so a new pic was posted. This started raising alarms. After that, this person posted again with more pictures. This is when users started to alert the FBI. The 4chan serial killer went on hiatus temporarily, but returned in September to post more photos, this time of a man. With the first posted image, the person wrote dying, and with the second, he wrote dead. The uploader said he'd return in a month to finish the game, but said he might have to use a different site since his post kept getting removed on 4chan. Was it all a hoax? Most believed this person to be legit, as the photos didn't look staged, nor did they appear to be crime scene photos. In any case, this mystery has yet to be solved. Before we get to number 1, my name is Chills and I hope you're enjoying my narration. If you're curious about what I look like in real life, then go to my Instagram at DylanIsChillinYT and tap that follow button to find out. I'm currently doing a super poll on my Instagram. If you believe ghosts are real, then go to my most recent photo and tap the like button. If you don't, DM me saying why. When you're done, come right back to this video to find out the number 1 entry. Also, follow me on Twitter at YT_chills because that's where I post video updates. It's a proven fact that generosity makes you a happier person. So if you're generous enough to hit that subscribe button and the bell beside it, then thank you. This way, you'll be notified of the new videos we upload every Tuesday and Saturday. Number 1. Nikki Catsouras photographs. When 18-year-old Nikki Catsouras was involved in a high-speed car chase in 2006 near Lake Forest, California, she lost control of her father's Porsche 911 Carrera and hit a toll booth while driving speeds of more than 100 miles per hour. And there was a huge controversy following the event, as photographs of the scene were leaked and published on the internet. Catsouras passed away on impact. Newsweek reported that the accident was so gruesome, the coroner wouldn't allow her parents to identify their daughter's body, but somehow after California Highway Patrol officers photographed the scene and forwarded these images to colleagues, the photos appeared online. Later, 2 California Highway Patrol employees, Aaron Reich and Thomas O'Donnell, confessed to leaking the photos. The parents of the girl discovered these horrific photos of their child online, and they began receiving harassing emails, which included the images in them. A fake MySpace tribute to Catsouras was also set up, but it simply contained links to the photos. These images are so horrible, you should never Google them. All of this harassment and damage resulted in the Catsouras' parents homeschooling their youngest daughter, and the family sued the CHP and the 2 dispatch supervisors who leaked the photos, eventually reaching a settlement with the CHP for $2.37 million in damages. Hopefully they'd receive some closure. Thanks for checking out this video. Be sure to subscribe because we upload new countdowns every Tuesday and Saturday. Or if you're still not convinced, here are some of our other videos that I think you'd like. Enjoy!